Okay, I didn't want to bore people. We had about a 15-minute conversation about a class that just finished up on polite play and having to do with how dogs and humans can engage in play with happiness. And that's an emotion, obviously. It's a feeling, it's an emotion. At least I've heard about feelings because I only have one. But it's a joke. Anyway, um, so a couple of the areas that we discussed were the effect of the dog on you as well as you on the dog. So when you engage with a dog for all, I won't say randomness, but to just have the enjoyment of engaging. First of all, that's a different sense of things than if you engage, you're happy for a dog doing something you want it to do. That's entirely different. It's a different purpose, it's a different intent, it's different the way you behave, and the dog does too because it senses all that. How does it sense it? We'll get into that. Okay. So this is human emotions, how they affect dogs, basically. And I talk about this aspect in many classes, but I wanted to do a little deeper dive into this. I give different examples at times. One of those things was, um, back when I took on clients up until I think 2017, because now trainers are my clients or anybody else who wants to learn. Uh, but I don't take on individual clients because I personally made a vow I would never be in competition for a client to any of my students ever, anywhere. So I refer everybody who calls me up wanting help with their dog to you guys. Um, that's just my moral compass. So I'm not in competition with you. My job, my profession is teaching. That's what I do now. I'm an educator for you guys. I'm your personal resource, if you will. That's what I wanted to make myself for that. So, but human emotions are complex in many ways, and in some of the courses, course two especially, and we talk about um, where on the chart of emotions are humans versus dogs. And so I kind of wanted to start with that to tell you that the the more intellectual long-term expectation emotions like jealousy and deceit and all these other things that humans learn, they start learning that after about 2.5 to 3 years of age through experimentations. Well, so, and I've talked about this before, even in these classes, the monthly classes, um, and that is that nature, when for 1 million years more, uh, 37 million years as canids have been around, specifically, and your life expectancy is between 4 to 7 years uh, on average. You don't need to waste brain size, power, energy, getting food to feed an unuseful survival situation when you're only 4 to 7 years expectation of living. So it makes perfect sense that genetically, dogs, wolves are a little more complicated in some ways, but not much more in the emotional aspects. Uh, so the ones that, so the, what's been eliminated out of canids has been any emotion that doesn't match up with how they have to survive. So what is that? Okay, so you have a family unit, you may have additional pack members, but that's where the limits of your emotional um, work really lies. Whereas with humans, our emotional, um, sorry, our emotional, had something pop up. Our emotional needs, because our life expectancy has been 20, 40, now almost 80 years in our life cycle, uh, we have a lot more time and therefore longer expectations of trust and all these other things that we try to hang on to. So nature says, okay, you can waste your time and energy as long as you've got food and water and shelter and a social unit that's large enough to provide not just basics, but specifics. In other words, specializations. Even within a wolf pack or a dog pack, you've got specializations. We go further into specializations. And our concepts of society are at this point now a global society of over 8 billion humans. Dogs can't think that way. They don't know about the earth, the size of it, where they are on it, or anything else. Okay. There's no need for them to because of their life cycles, even if they do live 22 years like my husky did. Um, that's a long time, obviously, for a dog, especially a large dog. But that's not the average. And in domestic care, I will put it that way, you know, the average mid-sized to large dog, not extra large, is somewhere between 9 and 15 years, depending on the breed. And smaller dogs, a little more. Large, extra large dogs, a lot less, sometimes 7 to 9 years or even less, depending on the breed. So that time frame of living with us in in a domestic, what we'll call a domestic situation, in other words, our our domestication, not them, um, has only been about the past 15,000 years. Well, that's a number of generations for dogs. Obviously, it's why they've spread and become many different species or sorry, breeds. It's not as many generations for us, but it has changed us in that amount of time. It's changed them. So there's a slight uptick in what is going on with dogs in emotions, at least the understanding of them. That's why this whole story here is very important. They still don't understand our advanced social expectation emotions, which occur from about 3 years of age for a human on. The learning processes. It doesn't mean dogs are ignorant and only intelligent to a 2.5-year-old human child. That's what they are compared to, which is ridiculous because dogs understand and can do things that humans never will be able to do. So rating intelligence based upon us, like I said in the last class, is like a dolphin rating our intelligence based upon how long we can hold our breath underwater. You can't look at another animal and say, well, we're going to judge it based upon our understanding of intelligence, emotion, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to look honestly at that animal completely and see, how does it survive? Why did it survive this way? What energies does it use? What is it capable of? What's its life cycle and all of those things? So So what we're trying to do is we're trying to not separate, because dogs have similar emotions to us up to that 2.5 years of age, which are base level emotions, right? And they serve to have a small society, okay? In other words, a social unit, which is what dogs have. They don't think in terms of cities and states and countries and global communities, or different, associations with thousands, millions of humans, all that stuff. They don't think that way. Um, they're they're incapable of thinking in those terms because it doesn't make sense for nature to do that. They cannot build bonds with a billion dogs on Earth. There's no way for them to communicate that. There's no need for it. So their emotional aspects, um, they're complex, but not as confounding, I'll say, as humans. And so when we use our emotions, our higher level emotions, which are actually developed over the past 50,000 years or so, for societal norms to learn how to live together in larger and larger and larger groups, and then have specializations and the meanings for all those, and then long-term expectations. I mean, social unit, and my wife and I have been married for 40, almost 48 years now. Okay. Well, that's an unheard of thing, and wasn't it's an example. Okay. Dogs have no need for that, but uh, everything to keep that together for 48 years is a lot of mental and emotional energy, right? And acceptance between each other, much less all of the rest of society. So there's an awful lot of mental capacity used and emotions needed for humans to have that type of long life and connections with others to feel safe. Okay. And emotions, it's a primal instinctual thing up to a point, but our emotions now are utilized mainly because we control our environment so much, that human emotions are about acceptance in society, rather than all of a sudden getting flushed with adrenaline because a bear is running at us. That doesn't happen very often anymore. Uh, about the worst thing that happens to you is you break a nail. Sorry. I mean, you know, there's more to it than that, obviously. I mean, we have accidents, there's problems, and humans have problems together, etc. But we are in such a protected uh, part of the world. If you're watching on a computer screen, yeah, you've got stability, you've got basically non-historical stability and safety. Because going back to another element, which is, a study I did a while back was looking at how many human deaths are there from violent actions. And 4,000 years ago, 60% of humans on Earth died a violent death. 60%. Now we have less than 0.001% of humans die from violent actions. That's the average. So we live in the most safe, protected time ever. So what are those emotions then used for? They're overused for a an internal mental feeling about things, about being unhappy, or not getting your way, or things like that. Has nothing to do with political climate or anything else. That's what we use our emotions for anymore. And so what happens is those emotions make no sense to dogs, guys. None. And the more you use those types of emotions and feelings around your dogs, around them, the less they understand about you, the less they can trust you, because someone that flies off the handle, even even mentally, not physically showing it, um, you lose control. Therefore, you're not trustworthy because you can't handle it. Whatever it is the dog senses around, you're unaware of, and you're in your own emotional state. So the dog cannot trust you. So you've broken trust, and you can no longer be leader or counted on in those situations wherever you have gotten emotional. Unrelated emotions to dogs and unrelated to what's actually going on in the environment instead of inside your own head. Now, how do dogs sense those things? Okay, so first of all, dog senses are much more sensitive than ours, other than, well, I shouldn't even say that. So their sensations, I've talked about before that dogs are the brain of the dog, the way a brain is structured, the way it thinks, the way it engages in all the environment, including us, is through scent. Ours is eye. We are eye dominant, hand subdominant. Dogs are nose or scent dominant, mouth subdominant. They smell it, they manipulate it with the mouth. We see it, we manipulate it with our hands. If you can understand that to the depth that that really means, and that it's amazing that we have any type of connection with these animals, much less a 40,000 year connection, that we've become a co-species. We literally have. And that finally, that's starting to get through to a number of people in the scientific community too. So, because I've been thinking that for 30, 35 years. There's some of us that have. So what does that all mean? Does it mean you can't be emotional? No, not at all. Um, I see emotional people all the time that don't affect their dog. Why? Because the dog has dismissed them. It's irrelevant to their survival, and it's irrelevant to their environment the way they see it. Now, if you're safe within your, confines of your home, which is the inner den, and you do things inside there, it's safe for you to have those emotions, right? Even ones that dogs don't understand. You're still becoming non-understandable to a dog. If you repeat something over and over and over again, then they finally just go, okay, that's that animal. I'm going to dismiss when it does that, because they are incapable of understanding those emotions. They have no sense of them. They can't, there's no replication of it in a dog's brain. Okay. A lot of humans, um, how can I put this? Project onto dogs, and projection is a psychological thing that we humans do. Uh, our emotions, when we see a particular look from a dog, that they don't have those emotions at all. So we're projecting on them to understand them from our standpoint. We project a human emotion on them of guilt or blame or fault or jealousy or any of those other things. And it's detrimental to you understanding and, frankly, connecting with your dog to think that that's what they're doing when it's not at all. It's a much more complex behavior that mimics what we would do. And it's probably, I haven't been around for several million years, just 637, but um, it's probably has to do with our evolution, that because of our lifetime and the actions and behaviors that we did when we were caught or something else, um, was an anticipation, like dogs, of a retribution, an upset, a reaction, whatever else. And that, because of the amount of time and the social aspects, then we developed other emotions in our, as our brains got larger and we had a prefrontal cortex that had different values, different understandings to it. And so the base level survival aspects have turned into much more complex feelings and emotions, guys. Now, that's unnecessary for other animals that don't live that long. It's a waste of energy, and a waste of energy, an unnecessary energy drain doesn't allow a species to survive, because while food is plentiful for humans on Earth now, it's not for any other animal. So they can't feed the 20% of the energy required by 1% of the mass of the body, which is the brain. And if the brain doesn't get that energy, it dies, or nature says, we can't, if I can't get that much energy, I have to provide a smaller brain, and therefore something's got to go. So that's where all of that comes from, and I wanted to explain that a little more in depth than I get to in other classes. So let's look at some things here. Um, so we've talked about learned emotions and higher emotions in humans. Dogs, what is necessary for survival? They are in small units, therefore their social constructs are much less complicated than ours, because we have social units that are small, medium, large, extra large, and globally. So we had to develop a different sense of things just to survive together in groups. Dogs don't have that, didn't have to worry about it, so they haven't had to have values and emotions for massive groups of humans, or dogs in that case. Okay. So in small units, nature limits those needs to what is necessary for survival. That's it. Because we have about 1 billion dogs in the world at this point, close to 70% of them are street dogs. So they live like it was 40,000 years ago, in fact, even though they live all around usually urban areas. So they're kind of like the way rats developed around humans, because there's a lot of food waste. And so rats started hanging around and picking off food from human waste. And that's what those dogs do too, because there's a lot of opportunities, because humans either store, cache, or waste a lot of foods. So relevance is what we're really looking for. What is relevant to a dog, and how do we give a feeling, an emote, or are able to be relevant, understandable from a dog's perspective, not just a human perspective. So what I try to do is I try to keep, when I'm around dogs, working with dogs, and I try to keep it to emotional states that they understand. And for those of you who've had course 2 or upper ones, we have charts on that. Um, and you could actually look that up. It's probably online somewhere at this point. Um, you can look up, dog emotion state versus humans, and you can probably find a chart on that, somewhat accurate. I'll put it that way. Um, so it's, to be relevant, you have to be understandable. And if you're not understandable because of your state of mind, your emotional state, or your um, or your feelings inside, I'll put it that way, uh, then you've broken a, a bond, a trust. The dogs know they cannot count on you at certain times in certain situations. It's like losing control when another dog comes running up and you get scared and upset and yell and all the other things. What do you think your dog is going to do about that? Depends on the state of mind of that dog and what it's capable of. Is it trapped with you? Is it a tiny dog and there's three, you know, large dogs coming after you, and you pick it up, and that dog's, of course, going to be terrified because you're terrified. Whereas if you kept your cool, so to speak, and you addressed those three dogs, your dog is going to, one, obviously trust you more, two, not add to the cacophony of the problem, be much more calm, cool, reactive, uh, and you've gained a lot of street cred with your dogs. So now it doesn't have to amp up whenever there's something else around. And I know some of you guys have experienced that because you've told me about some of your experiences out out there with other dogs off leash, etc., coming at you and your dogs, and your change of mind and how you behaved changed everything, and it does. So it's not just, so let's talk about how dogs sense your emotions and feels. Okay. I used to do an experiment with my clients years ago. I didn't do it with every one of them, but it was an exercise that I did as, first of all, as an experiment initially, like, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago, to help reach some of the people who wanted to be emotional and loved their dogs and all this stuff. And I had to reach those people. And so I did experiments, and it became an exercise for a while, for a couple of decades actually, that I would ask them to sit on their couch, and I'd give them a scenario. Okay, I want you to, don't move a muscle, don't change your face, don't do anything, look off into the backyard or something. And then think about the worst thing, the thing that's going to get you the maddest. I don't care what it is. Don't tell me what it is. Don't tell anybody else. Don't change anything in your physical appearance, your state. Don't tense up, nothing. Think about that. And so they did. And, it upset some people physically too, because, they had traumatic experiences. And I shied them away from that after learning a couple of times that affected people. Kind of, they took it to heart, I'll put it that way. And so I didn't want that to affect them negatively to that extent as well as, so keep away from the traumatic experiences. And within a very short amount of time, their dogs would start coming up to them, look at them, sniff, you know, jump up on their, paws up on them, stuff like that. Were very concerned, upset. Some of the dogs turned and looked at me like I was doing something. And then I'd say, okay, now stop. And now what I want you to do is I want you to think about the most calm, happiest moment, the greatest place you've ever been, enjoyment, not excitement, but just composed, out in nature, wherever you feel the best. And concentrate on nothing but that. Don't change anything on the outside. And very quickly the dogs would calm down. And some of them would even lay at their feet. So others would go, okay, everything's okay. I'm going to go over here again, or go off to somewhere else. And it's just the state of mind change. Nothing changed on their exterior that we can sense. So what was going on? Well, First of all, again, dogs are dominant in scent, right? Uh, we can talk about them detecting one particle out of 10 quadrillion particles. That's 10 with 15 zeros behind it. Write it out. That's just unfathomable to us. Okay. They can do that, and they can sense every particle and detect it, give it value, and understand it. That's how sensitive that capability is, because their brain is structured for that, period. That's what the brain itself focuses on. So your your sweat, your breath, when you start thinking something, the neurotransmitters and hormones, the all of those aspects in your body that make you think, feel that way, it flushes throughout your entire body, and you're breathing out, and within a few seconds that breath gives them the information, regardless of what else is going on, with that there's something wrong or there's something fantastic. Okay. Because they can smell it, and it doesn't take them very long to smell that. You know, the reason the reason Bosch is a beyond excellent, incredible service animal is because of his scent detection and his capability of understanding. He detects when we're going to be sick 3 days before we get sick. Uh, he he was able to detect. Uh, I'll go ahead and say it. It's personal. My daughter's she had an internal bleeding. He alerted on her 30 minutes before she started going white cold, almost passed out in a chair. When I looked around for him, I saw her, and he was sitting there waiting for me to do something. And she was, unbeknownst to us, internally bleeding. We were someplace at their house basically, and I told my wife to get her to the hospital immediately. So they went to an emergency clinic as fast as they could. Um, as soon as they wheeled her in, they checked things. They called for an ambulance to get her over to the hospital. They had already prepared surgery for her because she was bleeding out internally. And if Bosch hadn't detected that, she'd be dead right now. So those things, those sensations, the understanding of what they smell, you know, uh, smell inside of you. They can smell the cancer. They can smell the ulcer. They can smell what's wrong, what's right, what's supposed to be, what's not. And what's supposed to be and what's not are emotions that and feelings that humans have that either make sense to them and are appropriate in that moment, or it's inappropriate. It doesn't make any sense to them because they don't experience those things. Because the chemical combinations that we have for those emotions either mimic others that doesn't make sense for the dog to have in that moment, or it's like you being on this phone and all of a sudden you're chewing somebody out, or you're just laughing and there's nothing else around that makes any sense to them why you would have that feeling and emotion and smell about you. Okay. So that's one aspect of it, which is a huge, huge major aspect. The other aspect, for instance, with Bosch detecting problem with Gail, was their hearing is 4 times more sensitive than ours. He, first of all, they can hear your heartbeat. They can also hear bits of blood flow when it doesn't make sense, when it doesn't sound normal. So if you've got a blockage, if you've got a leak, if you've got the things that happen medically, they can detect those things. It corroborates what they're smelling. It also corroborates what their vision is, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So there's 3 main senses that they understand: the sensation of smell, um, the hearing aspect, and the vision. And the vision, again, in other classes, if you've taken other classes, you know that while the light range that we can see, in other words, the wavelength range that we humans can see, all you ever see is charts of, well, this is what humans see because of our tricolor vision receptors, right? And this is what dogs see, but they only show that range. And it's because they've got two color receptors versus three. So what they've negated is frankly, the ultraviolet light range that dogs see that we don't see any. And they can see up to 61% of ultraviolet light range. Okay, so what does that mean? If they see a spot in you, because they don't see you like we see each other. If they see a spot or something wrong, or they'll see tension, they'll see an ulcer, they'll see something inside of you that you can't see from the outside, but they can, because they're actually kind of seeing inside of you. Hang on a second. I'm going to address this. Sorry. Someone was walking past and Toffee was letting me know, and I let her know. It's okay. I got it. Um, so the vision side of things is one that most most people don't know or understand. They diminish what dogs can see because we're superior in vision, supposedly. So yeah, we've got 20/20 vision, at least that's what we accept as normal, right? And so most of us have to have glasses anymore to have that or close to it. Dogs are 20/80. Okay. So what we see at 80 feet looks the same to them at 20 feet. In other words, it requires closer in for them to get that detail, that clarity of vision. So they don't use their eyes the way that we do. It's for motion, movement, and profile shape mainly. Okay. We use it for all sorts of other things because that's our dominant sense. But if you look at, so their capability of smell, hearing, and vision, those three things together right there, much less the other patterns that they see in humans, they're going to know every feeling, every sense inside of you, whether you want to show it or not. So that's where in classes I talk about congruence or congruity. And all of those senses that they understand have to align for them to trust you, to understand you, for you to be relevant. Because in nature, if you try to understand and understand and understand, and you're incapable of understanding something, you finally just dismiss it because the energy and time it takes to try to understand something that's incomprehensible to that animal is a waste of time and energy. And you don't have that kind of time and energy to waste on something that isn't important. And that's what happens with humans with wasting all of these emotions around dogs. Okay. It's because it's the way we want it, because how we understand it. So our effects on our dogs situationally as well as long term are the way you behave around your dogs and being honest with yourself. So it's working on yourself, you first again. It's working on yourself to be more understandable to your dog. And that's how you gain the trust of a dog to the depth that you you can. And that's an amazing relationship once you do that. So a lot of people like to emote around dogs or give them more, I won't say credit, I'll say give them more power to understand what we're thinking, feeling, believing, when in fact it's it's much more of a base survival level. And we're it's unnecessary for them to survive or to live with us to have those understandings of those emotions. They don't have them. They're incapable of it. So it's like, it's like you trying to understand quantum physics all of a sudden. You are currently and probably forever incapable of truly understanding what quantum physics is. Not because you're ignorant or don't study it. It's because quantum physics is such a, almost non-understandable thing. Um, there are experts in it in various little tiny pieces of it, but nobody understands the whole. And that's the whole point. So, you can kind of gather together an idea, but that's not the reality of it either. Well, that's what dogs do with us as well. So, the whole point is this is, you also dismiss what you can't understand because you don't want to take the time or the energy, et cetera, et cetera. Not you guys specifically, because here you are, you're trying to learn about these things, but you meaning humans. We tend to dismiss what isn't important to us in that moment, right? Because it's a waste of time and energy, and that's not what you want to pursue or know if it doesn't affect you in any other way than a negative or a dismissal. And that's the way dogs, especially with human emotions, those higher emotions, just they have to dismiss it because it doesn't make sense when we have certain feelings about things that their sense of the environment is entirely different than ours. Remember, they're living like it's 40,000 years ago. Well, we aren't. Well, we do in some ways. Well, we're still humans, unfortunately. So, um, so I'm gonna stop my little lecture here and see if you guys have any questions, because that's that's the basics of it. A little more in depth than I'm able to get to in classes, but understanding the senses of dogs, the brain of dogs, how they think, how we think versus how they think, how our prefrontal cortex and our cerebral cortex layers have, I don't know, they're advantageous for us because we don't have big teeth. We're not, we don't run 35 miles, 40 miles an hour and, take down prey that way. We have to have tools. We have to do all sorts of things to be effective to stay alive, right? So, uh, which came first, the brain or the tools? We don't know, and we're still trying to figure all that out. So, I'm sure it was a it was a combination of things that allowed us, again, the humans, the dogs that survived be, beyond and had progeny and continued modifications, we're the survivors. So anyway, so I'm going to open this up to if anyone has a question or comment or anything else. Yes, Angela.
There's been a few questions that have popped up that
Okay.
Rachel has provided in the chat.
Okay.
First question, would you expect, as dogs do live longer over time, that their emotional capacities would increase as well over time?
Um, if if humans and dogs are successful at living for the next couple of 100,000 years, yeah. because, and there's no guarantee on that, frankly. Um, things change. We would all like to think that humans will go on until the end of time, but that's probably not going to happen, guys. And so if dogs continue, something that I said on an interview last night, which will be published out there, a podcast that you guys can probably watch in about a month, uh, was, the aspect of um, the state of dogs these days with the state of spay and neuter. Constantly, we are taking good genetics out of the mix by spaying and neutering almost every dog. And so the ones that are filling the gaps are the puppy mills and the backyard breeders that don't look out for genetics and don't understand and don't care. So the few people comparatively and the few numbers of dogs that are being bred for purpose, good genetics, better, etc., etc., I'm not sure that dogs are going in the right direction. Let me put it that way. We are, frankly, as a society, destroying good dogs. So I'm not sure that they will survive better, longer, or get those emotions. So that's the other caveat on that. Anything
Um,
else?
yes. So, how is quote unquote being safe or not safe? How does it influence the dog's capability to recognize changes within the human? For example, if a dog is extremely anxious, is it still able to smell these chemical changes within a human and to make the correct connections? Or is their system so flooded by anxiety that they're not able to smell these changes?
Excellent question, actually. And yeah,
Rachel.
so of course. Uh,
Yeah.
so here's the issue. The issue is that uh, the way I put it is severe case behaviors. So severe fear, severe um, aggression. There's a number of severe case behaviors around the fringes, and you get probably 60% of the dogs, at least at this point in time, that can handle most things that come along, and they're not severe. The further you get away from that center group of dogs, then you get more and more severe behaviors. So and those are the dogs that I explain that are like humans. They're inside their own head because we like to be inside of our own brain instead of out here with presence of what's going on in the actual environment. Most dogs are, they don't have I'll put it this way. They don't operate inside their own head all the time. So the dogs that always needed my help were the ones like humans inside their own head and creating their own universe and reality. So the scents and the smells that dogs like that get actually adds to, they may not react specifically to it, but then they start identifying that environment with the problem that they're in, that emotional state that they're already in. And yeah, you can't help a dog by being emotional like that, much like the Fearful Feral Dog workshop that I've done. I did for 4 years. Julie's doing it for the second year after this now, so 6 years in a row. We've got a lot of examples of how you work with fearful and feral animals, and it's not through human emotion because they're expecting the worst from you. And if you don't give them the worst and you actually become uh, a little more understandable partner, well, then you've got to keep human emotions out of it, period. You have to, because they have to understand they are safe to even an incrementally better level than what they don't feel safe at in that moment. And it is about increments. It's not one state versus the other. It's in increments. How long does it take for you to get somebody's trust, or you to trust somebody else, human to human? It takes a long time and a lot of experimentation, doesn't it? Okay. So you're looking at increments and you're judging those increments based upon how you feel safe, and they appear to be trustworthy to you. So those incremental changes, if you suddenly get emotional, you've destroyed a lot of that. And it takes much longer to get that trust back because you've proven yourself untrustable. So that's the key to it, whether the dog's excitable, terrified, aggressive, whatever it is, those are states of mind where it's already determined that something bad's going to happen or something good is going to happen. And that may not comport with reality of the situation. So your emotional state in those has to align with, let's calm it down, let's be safe, and now we can begin trusting the actual actions, behaviors, and the environment that we're in together. So that engagement again. Okay. I hope that answers some aspects of that. So I see something else on there, but I can't read it because small screen and no glasses on. So what else?
Don't worry, I got you covered. Uh, from Tiffany, strictly hypothetical, would you be able to match the dog's emotions, say overexcitement, and then take them on a journey to adjust their emotional state by adjusting your own?
Yes.
Is a sort of learning, a level of mimetic emotional learning
Yes.
ride.
So for instance, one of the ways that I explained I've used for years, and as a matter of fact, Casey Cover covered this years ago too, which Casey's an interesting person. Anyway, we're friends. Um, but how one of the examples she gave, which I'm going to give her credit because wasn't my idea, was about how you say "whoa" to a horse, right? So you start at a higher level and you go down, and the horse feels that sensation of slowing down. So verbally, so sound wise, you do that too. Okay. I've used the pat to match the heartbeat of the dog or the breath of the dog to go, and then deliberately slow it down. And it reaches the brain of the dog to slow that down. So it also changes the state of mind. Absolutely, you can. You can certainly excite a dog. You can get it into those primal instinctual shots of adrenaline, dopamine. Hey, buddy, good boy. Instantly changes the mind of the dog, doesn't it? We're going to use those things to agree with the dog. Okay. There's less, there's less, how can I say this? There's less negative or punishment, and I don't mean harm, necessary than a tacit disapproval, a disinterest. There's less harsher things necessary than people do because they put a time frame on something when they think they need to get the result now, when in fact you're breaking the pattern of learning because the dog doesn't feel safe if you go over what's necessary, just enough and no more. That's what that means. You have to experiment around with what that just enough and no more is. And that takes experimentation on your part with all sorts of layers of dogs. That's why it takes time, takes years to have mastery in any subject matter, period, ever. It just does. There's no substitute for that amount of experience, time, experimentation. Doesn't mean you'll get there if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and pushing the dog, crushing the dog, instead of learning from the dogs. So anyway, what else?
That was the last one.
Okay, well, Karen's got her hand up. Karen, what do you
Okay.
have?
I might have trouble putting this question into words. It has to do with the facial expression and evolution, and
Okay,
how, like, I'm noticing, like, Damon has a lot more facial expression and Tomodachi had not so much, but as we're integrating more and more, he has more facial expression and it's changing. And I'm looking at how humans evolved facial expression, and we use that to feel safe, and we use it to recognize danger. And
yes,
so I'm wondering, with this canine-human relationship evolution, as we succeed at what we're doing and affecting evolution, can we be thinking, well, maybe the dogs will be experiencing more deeper or different ways of emotion? And because it shows in their face, and David's face has gotten more expressive too, so it's
yeah.
changed
So he's feeling safer.
to girls, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
Okay.
Damon. Yeah, oh, okay, gotcha. So um, she's feeling safer to show the emotion. Okay, so you have to feel safe to show that emotion in that facial expression in that situation. So let's talk about emotion, or the appearance of emotion, the facial signal. Again, we go back to other courses that I teach, which is, that human facial expression is 55% of our communication. 55%. So all the micro muscle movements, how you look, what your everything is about the face. Okay. So 45% is your verbal, your physical, your body, what you say, what you do, et cetera, et cetera. 55%, the majority of how we communicate is with our face. So it is expected, or presumed, I will put it that way, that the two sister lines of wolves, actually there's a third one, but I'm not going to get into that became proto dogs. They created themselves, right? Somewhere between 40 and 161,000 years ago. And those are different lines of animals that were wolves. Obviously, they still are. Um, that that became the dogs. Now, what was it that wolves certainly have, and different species of wolf have different facial expressions, very similar for most of them. Why? Because uh, many of the wolves on Earth died out and repopulated starting about 26,000 years ago. So there hasn't been that much diversity in wolves genetically since that die off into what is used to be known as Beringia, which is the lower sea level area between Alaska and Siberia, Alaska, Yukon, Siberia. That there's a massive land mass area that's now underwater, but includes Alaska, Yukon, and Siberia. Um, and that's where the wolves and most of the dogs kind of came from originally, sister lines. And so what was it? What were the attributes, the factors that got us to match up with that particular wolf line to that was more cooperative, more curious, more able, willing to communicate to us, and vice versa? How did we learn to match up, 41,500 years ago, which is our earliest find of humans and proto-dogs coming together. That there have to be a number of factors. One is um, useful, a useful ability, a trustworthiness, a a cooperative capability in the first place, territorial understanding, and I'll say a universal sameness, but a universal also separate capabilities. So humans had capabilities, those proto-dogs, the wolves, had other capabilities. And so when you look at it, there had to be a difference at that point that those animals did use some facial expressions and understand to be able to understand that facial expressions mean something to that animal, to look to a human and see that that's a facial expression that means something, because a wolf is not going to look at your where your finger points, what your facial expression is to get any sense of information from you. They won't. Modern wolves will not do that, but dogs will. Matter of fact, some dogs will do it more than chimpanzees, great apes, even human children. So how did that come about? Well, the survival aspect of a cooperative survival aspect and the ability to gain more understanding by actual muscular changes within the facial expressions of those wolves, which became proto-dogs, became dogs. We have primal ancient breed dogs that don't bother with facial expressions. Akitas are one of those. Um, they have less facial expression need or bother with. Ovcharkas are the same. The dogs that go out there that had a job for us, that made that once they got to a certain age, when we worked with them for what their purpose was, they were left out there on their own to make the determinations. So they did not need to communicate to us through other means, facial expressions. They knew what their job was, what their purpose in life was, to protect that palace, to protect that herd, to et cetera, et cetera. So there wasn't the need to develop all these other facial muscular expressions that more modern breed dogs did. What's amazing to me is that Siberian Husky, being the oldest continuous, do have those even more exaggerated facial expressions and appearances of emotion, we'll say, because they're the clowns, but they're so intelligent. But I think part of that is the living with humans for so long as that specific breed, or close to that specific breed, for 30,000 years. And so they're very interesting. They're still primal instinctual brains, but probably the most, but they're highly intelligent, and they know when to dismiss us, and they will. That's why they go, yeah, no, not this time. And you don't really mean it, or you're irrelevant in this moment. Whereas the more modern domestic dogs pay attention to us more if we ask them for that, and we're relevant to that. So there's a wide range of dogs that have developed or not developed those facial expressions. The ones that are capable, the more modern, what we call modern European dogs, which are probably 95% of dogs on Earth, specific clades, they have the capabilities. Now, whether they use those or not, I know this is a long answer. Sorry, Karen. You know me, I got to go into the everything. So your dog developing those expressions, first of all, it was capable. It had no outlet for that or no need for that to begin with. And so it's gotten more, it feels more safe. Therefore, it's learned more because you have to be safe to learn. And it's carried it on to trust, to say, okay, I'm going to show you more expression, more feel, more communication to you because I trust this situation more. Okay, so a long-winded explanation of the history of the universe. Sorry.
No, thank you. And so another thing that comes up is, so, because we're affecting evolution now as we're doing,
Yes,
and
always. Yes.
so, like, if they don't have like their genetic offspring, and she's learned all this, they don't have to, it's still transferred, like that morphogenetic code, it's still transferred to other species.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So
You
it's,
know, the precession of the Earth every 23,000 years, it wobbles around once in 23,000 years. That's why we have different epic cycles of weather and everything else versus south versus north and et cetera, et cetera. The 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 polar, you know, I will say the magnetic poles, north versus south, have flipped over time, which causes massive changes in environment and genetics, therefore. Uh, just the movement of the North Magnetic Pole in my lifetime has been thousands of miles from Canada over towards now this Russia. Just in my lifetime, that magnetic pole has moved massively, especially in the past 20 years, much more than it had the past 100 years. So that's going to affect a lot of things because it affects Earth's crust, climate, us, the sun spots, all of those things. That's going to change genetics. So is this one thing that is going to carry on? Don't know, but it's another factor. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Nope. Worn you out? Bored you? Okay.
As always.
Oh, well, it's about that time anyway. So I don't want you hitting me upside the head through the screen. So I will stop. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I it's something that I have studied, gosh, all my life, frankly, but certainly from my time in college at human psychology and understanding the effects where emotions come from, understanding our brain structurally as well as that, and then trying to understand dogs from that depth of understanding and study. And this is something that we make a lot of disconnects when we go into whether it's good or bad emotion, whether we feel great or we don't, if it's incongruous with what's going on with that dog, um, we could be breaking trust if you're unpredictable and out of control. So you've got to say, is it worth it to to just do what I want and not consider the dog, so to speak. Okay. So anyway, we'll call it quits with that. Thank you guys. I appreciate each and every one of you. You notice the change of the subscription. What we call it now is the monthly class, because these are classes, guys. I noticed that there was a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what CHRI Live Talks was. It's not a bitch and gripe session. It's not a podcast. People have misunderstood vastly. It's a monthly class that you get for 75 to 90 minutes of class time for $15 a month. That's what it is. Okay. So it's been renamed as a monthly class, and that's really what it is. So, you know, got to be able to have people understand, to hopefully get a few more people on here so that I can continue to do this. So I'm not putting pressure on you guys, and I'm not asking you to proselytize for me. But if this is valuable to you, let others know, please, because you know I'm not popular. I don't have a million followers. So anyway, thank you guys very much. I truly appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Bye bye.